Hi guys, please like, share and subscribe. And if you want full course for any actuarial subject, visit theactuarialguy.com or WhatsApp on this number. Thank you.
Hello and welcome guys. In this video, we are discussing subject CB2, that is business economics. So I will give you a subject overview and talk about how to crack the exam, right? So what will we discuss about in this video? We'll talk about the broad syllabus objective, that is what is it that IFOA or IAI needs you to learn, what is their perspective, where are they coming from. Then I'll get into description of each individual topic and the expected time that it will take for you to cover each and every topic. I'll give you a broad exam study strategy for IFOA and IA, and I'll discuss my course for exam CB2. Okay. Now, firstly, let's start with the overall syllabus objective and the study duration. See, CB2 is a easy subject, easy exam as compared with your CM and CS exams, and you would also see this in the pass percentage. The pass percentages are much higher than what they are for CM and CS exams, and this is true for both IA and IFOA. But this is a subject you cannot take for granted. It's not as light as your CB3 or your CP3 kind of an exam, right? This still requires you to cover a fair bit of syllabus. The syllabus for CB2 is really big, okay? If you will compare it against your class 12th economics, class 11th, 12th economics, if you have studied that, or if you have studied economics at A level, you will see that the syllabus of CB2 is much bigger, right? So it's a very wide syllabus which does not get a lot into the depth of economics. I have studied economics at a master's level, right? There it's all about depth, right? So it gets very mathematically rigorous. Here you're touching upon a lot of topics, right? So that's the idea. So the objective is to teach microeconomic and macroeconomic theory to actuarial students. The idea behind that is that in the long run, when you work as actuaries, you will be working in a macroeconomic context, with a macroeconomic background, right? Because let's say you are trying to mitigate the interest rate risk for your company, which may be an insurance company or a financial institution, you will have to understand how monetary policy works, right? How the central bank of the country determines its interest rate. What are the various tools that the central bank uses, right? What are the various macroeconomic factors that you should care about, right? So that is the idea. As actuaries, we need to be acquainted with the concepts of economics, and that is exactly what this syllabus does with its huge size, right? But then don't worry, the topics are not very difficult to understand, right? So that's the thing. It might largely seem sort of subjective and theoretical, but there are very interesting mathematical parts, and the real magic of this subject happens when you connect it to the real world. So that is what I try to do in my course as well. I get into the real world phenomenons which reflect this theory, right? Because economics is very, very relatable, right? It is all about things we see all around us, right? So it's a really fun subject, right? Now, how much time do you need to study CB2? In order to study CB2, you should ideally give anything between 75 to 150 hours. Now, why is the range so wide? See, a lot of you would have studied economics earlier, right? So you are coming with that background. If you're coming with a background in economics, it would take you about 75 hours if your economics is very strong, right? But if you're completely new to this, then you need to put in the amount or number of hours that IFOA recommends, that is about 150 hours, right? So you need to plan accordingly. Now, in terms of the material, see, for most exams of IFOA, the combined material pack that IFOA gives is usually enough, right? The acted combined material pack, right? But here, in case of CB2, if you would see, the combined material pack is almost completely useless, except for the questions that it offers. The combined material pack actually refers to two books, these two books. One is called as Economics by Sloman, Garrett and Guest, and the second one is called as Economics for Business by the same authors again, right? So majorly almost 85 to 90% of the syllabus is based on the first book, and about 5 to 10% of 5 to 15% is based on the Economics for Business book, right? So everywhere in the CMP you will just see that refer to this section, refer to that section, so on and so forth. So the course that I have also made, I've made based on these books, right? If you want to study on your own, the idea would be to open the CMP, see what sections of these two books you need to read, and you need to read from these books, right? So these books are the primary material for subject CB2, and don't cover these books fully, at least for an exam purpose. Like if you're interested in economics, you can read through both of them fully, right? But from an exam point of view, only specific sections of these books are needed, and those sections are referred to in the combined material pack, right? Now what I want to get into at this point is description of every topic, like what all we will cover in this subject and how much time you should give. I will give you a weekly plan. So I've prepared about a 10 to 11 weeks plan to cover the entire subject CB2, assuming you study 10 hours per week. So that is my assumption here, that you study about 10 hours per week, which if you're studying on weekdays, it translates to 2 hours per day. If you're studying that much and you're completely new to economics, right? I've given you a plan with which you can cover it in about 100 hours. And then the remaining 50 hours I've left for your revision and, solving recent papers and all of that, right? So 100 hours plan for CB2 is as follows. So the first unit is related to economic concepts and thought. There are 2 chapters here. Basic introduction to economics happens here. What, why, and how of economics, right? What are the fundamental ideas behind economics, the problem of choice, scarcity, and all of that, right? And then we introduce macroeconomics, microeconomics, what they are, so on and so forth, right? So this is where this topic sort of starts, and then it gets into the 2 major economic systems that have prevailed in almost the last 100 years, which are socialism and capitalism, right? So it just compares socialism and capitalism in terms of their advantages and disadvantages, what works, what doesn't work. And then finally, we talk about the evolution of economic thought over the last 100 years. So who have been the various economists, what has been their contribution, what has been their theory, so on and so forth, right? So we talk about the classical school of economics, then we get into the Keynesian school, then we talk about monetarists, we talk about new classical, we talk about neoclassical, we talk about new Keynesian, so on and so forth. So there are a bunch of schools of thought that have come into economics at different points of time, and how they contradicted each other, what did they propose for, so on and so forth, right? So all of that is covered here. This should only take you about 4 hours to cover, and this is for covering just the if you're subscribing to my course, the video lectures and the CMP questions. Only that can be covered in about 4 hours, right? You can do this in your first week itself, because the first week I'm assuming you're studying for about 10 hours, right? So first 4 hours you do this. Then you move on to the second unit, which is related to demand and supply. Now here we talk about what are the basic drivers of demand and supply, right? And then how demand and supply interact in order to determine the equilibrium price and quantity, right? In the market, how is the price of any commodity that is bought or sold determined, right? How much of that commodity is sold, bought or sold is determined, right? That's what we talk about here, right? So, and this can be for any commodity. So the basic theory of demand and supply is discussed. There are 4 chapters here. Fairly big unit, would take you about 16 hours to cover, along with the combined material pack questions, right? And you can cover this by the end of your second week of preparation, right? Then we get into your third week, and now what you should do is solve revision notes, right? So if you don't have revision notes, you can obviously ask me to share them. I am happy to share them. So with revision notes, you have past exam questions along with solutions of 10 years, right? So the revision notes I'll be sharing with you would be about till 2020, right? So you'll have 10 years of questions to solve. Now, what are the chapters that are covered in the first booklet? It's the first chapter, which is related to economic concepts and systems, and then 3 chapters from this unit. The second chapter and this background to supply is not covered in this booklet. It's covered in a later booklet, right? So we'll deal with that there. This will take you about 6 hours to cover, right? Now we move on. Next, we have markets, right? So here we talk about various market structures such as perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, right? These are different kinds of markets that exist in the real world, right? Depending on how much competition there is in the market, you will find some markets where there is no competition at all. And then you'll find some markets where there is a lot of competition between many players, right? And then we talk about pricing strategy. How does pricing work in different markets? What are the different strategies that companies used in order to price? Some of this is core economic theory. Some of this goes into business theory, right? This would take you about 8 hours to complete and will flow from your week 3 to week 4. And then you move on to the booklet 2 of revision notes, where 4 chapters are covered: background to supply from the previous unit, and then you have these 3 chapters which are covered, right? And that in total would take you about 10 hours. This is one of the biggest booklet, right? So this you can complete in your week 4, right? So that is where your week 4 ends, and then finally in your week 5 you can do the last topic from microeconomics that is there in the syllabus, which is market failure and government intervention, right? Now here we talk about when there is any transaction, are there any external implications of it for the people who are not involved in the transaction? For example, if someone is smoking a cigarette, buying a cigarette and smoking it, it not only affects them but also affects other people around them. It increases the healthcare costs, right? We talk about something called as common goods, which are shared by the society, right? And nobody is individually responsible for taking care of them, right? Such as natural resources, right? Such as forests, right? So we talk about all of these and how are these dealt within the economic theory, and why do markets not work for such goods where there are externalities or they are common or public goods, right? Why do markets fail, and why is there a need for government intervention? That is, why does the government need to come in and say, look, what is happening in the market is not all right, I am going to fix this, and what are the tools that are available to the government, and why sometimes a government intervention itself causes a failure in the economy. So we talk about government failure and how can markets fix the government failure, right? So this would take you about 5 hours to do, right? Then we move on. This was your microeconomics. Now we get to macroeconomics, which talks about the economy as a whole, right? So far we were looking at very small specific units of the economy. Now we talk about the economy or a country's economy as a whole, right? So we firstly start with the macroeconomic environment, theories, and national income accounting. National income basically means what you would have heard being referred to as GDP. That is one of the measures of national income. What is a country's income, right? So that is something we talk about here. Here we discuss the macroeconomic environment. We get into classical and Keynesian theory. These were some of the theories that we had originally introduced in the second chapter, but here we talk about it in a lot of detail. You have monetarist and new classical schools, and Keynesian responses, right? Again, these are theories that have been discussed earlier, like introduced earlier, now are being discussed in a lot of detail. And finally, we get to the summary of debates on theory and policy. So, what are the various schools of thought? What do they advocate for, and what are they, sort of disagreeing on, right? So that is what we talk about, right? Uh, Now, some of these chapters we are not discussing in the order that they are given in your combined material pack. I've rejigged the order a bit so that you can solve the booklets a bit better, right? So here, some of these chapters are actually much later in the material, but I would recommend you cover it in this order that I'm recommending, right? And then you get into booklet 3, which covers all of these chapters along with chapter number 2, which was main strands of economic thinking, which was very much related to this, right? Various schools of thought, right? So through this you get into your week number 7, right? You've done about 70 hours of study by this point, right? And you've done some completed micro, started with macro, done a substantial portion of macro. After this, you get into financial systems, money markets, and monetary policy. Very important for actuarial students. So far, we were talking about economics more from a goods and services point of view. This unit particularly talks about money, right, and the system, financial system that has evolved from money, and then how does the regulation of it happen, what is the government's monetary policy, right? That is what it talks about. And based on this, there is booklet number 4. So you solve booklet number 4 after this, and this you do in your week number 8, right? Again, this is assuming that you follow this plan where you're doing 10 hours of study per week and you want to cover the syllabus in about 11 weeks, right? And then give 2 weeks to revision, right? So it's a 12 to 13 week, about 2.5 month plan that I've introduced for you, right? So yeah, or 2.5 to 3 month plan, right? Studying 10 hours per week, right? So that's the plan here, right? Now we move on. Next, we discuss international economics. We talk about international trade, which is imports and exports, tariffs, quotas, all of those things, right? You would have heard a lot about tariffs because they are in the news now. We talk about the exchange rate policy, which is, what is the rate of exchange between different currencies, dollar versus rupee, so on and so forth, and how does that affect economics at large, and what is monetary unionization. So for example, European Union shares its currency, which is euro, right? So can we have a truly global currency? That idea is explored in this unit, right? What would be the implications of it, so on and so forth, right? And this takes about 7 hours. We'll go into your week number 9 through this, right? So we had by this point we were at week 8, and it just starts at the end of week 8 and is explored fully in week number 9, and then you do your booklet 5 as well. Relatively small booklet, you can do it in 5 hours properly. When I say do a booklet, don't solve every question by writing it. It's not really needed. You can just go, go through the question, think about the solution, see what the solution is from my acted side. You can type out some questions if you want a Microsoft Word based practice, but it's really understanding and seeing how questions are supposed to be answered. Typing out answers here is not really needed in this subject. While that is really recommended in your CM and CS exams, here it would be an overkill, right? So I'm not recommending that. And finally, your last unit is related to macroeconomic objectives and policy. So we talk about what are the broad objectives of macroeconomics and how do you achieve that through supply side and demand side policy. And there is a booklet based on this. That booklet also includes market failure and government intervention, which is a microeconomics chapter that we had studied earlier, right? So that concludes your syllabus, and the number of hours, if you will add them, you'll get about 98 hours. So this is how you cover it in 100 hours, and then you give some time to question practice, right? So That's the idea of how to, approach this subject, and how to we've talked about every topic that is covered here. Okay, now let's just discuss the exam strategy. So, firstly, what is the exam pattern? For IFOA, it is you have home or center based exam. People who are located in bigger cities typically are allotted a center, and people who are in smaller towns uh, are given the option of writing the exam from home, right? Because there are no centers available in smaller towns, right? Secondly, the exam is closed book and proctored, right? So you cannot refer to any material or internet, nothing, right? No external material, no notes are allowed in the exam, and they proctor it. So they record your screen, and they record your video footage as well, in order to check that you have been fair during the exam. They check it using some sort of software, or which is probably AI based, right? And then the exam is based on Microsoft Word, so you have to type out your answers on Microsoft Word. MCQ questions, you have to write which option you are selecting on Microsoft Word. For II, you have home-based exams only. They are proctored and again closed book. You cannot refer to any material. They have live invigilation, so some proctor is looking at you all the time, and the exam is MCQ, right? In terms of the passing criteria, in II, you need to score at least 65% marks on the exam in order to pass. IFOA's passing criteria is not fixed. It depends from differs from attempt to attempt, but typically the pass mark is 60. So if you score 60%, you pass. Okay. Now let's just discuss what should be your preparation strategy, right? Firstly, for IFOA exam, the first thing you need to do is go through my lectures and review the notes I have provided. I have provided you with notes for every topic, which I've used to teach every topic, right? If you have not enrolled for my course and you're studying by yourself, then the idea is that you go through the CB2 CMP and cover all the relevant sections of the Sloman book, right? Of course, if you know some of these topics from earlier, you can skip them and directly go to questions. You can just do them through questions. That is a shortcut that you can use. But if you want to study properly, the idea would be going through CMP and going through both of the Sloman books wherever relevant, right? Next thing you do is you solve the CMP practice questions. You go through or solve the revision notes. Again, you don't need to type out every question here. This is not like your CMCS exam, right? So for numerical questions and for graphs, etc., you obviously should do it by hand, but other questions you can just read through, right? Just read through the question, think about what should be the answer, then compare your answer against there. Maybe write the main pointers that you will cover in the answer on a piece of paper and then compare, right? So that is your first prep, right? And then you go to revision. Revision should be based on every booklet. I've also advised you on how to do initial prep based on every booklet, right, in the previous section. Revision should again be based on every booklet. First thing you do is you review all of the notes that I've provided, right? Then you go to the flashcards. You use them to quickly revise. These you can use right before the exam as well to revise. Flashcards are kind of helpful. Then you revisit the revision notes questions wherever you were stuck. You go through them again. Then you solve by assignments if you have more time, right? This is obviously optional. Then what you do is you review the most recent 10 IFOA papers, right? So that will just give you an idea of what has been coming recently. You can also solve one or two exam papers under exam conditions on Microsoft Word, so that you have hands-on practice, right? This is how you go about preparing for IFOA. For II, you focus on getting the final answer only because it's MCQ. Solve more and more MCQ questions, right? Revision notes have a lot of MCQ questions. II past papers will have a lot of MCQ questions. You should review at least 10 II papers, right? And the focus should be completely on getting the final answer, right? So that should be your preparation strategy, and that is how it differs between IFO and II, right? So that is how you prepare for CB2. Now let's get into my course, right? What is included in my course? Now I have a master's degree in quantitative economics, so I try to give a lot of knowledge which I've learned after studying economics at such early levels through the CB2 papers, through my class 12, through my undergraduate degree, right? I try to incorporate some of the master's level stuff into the course, right? Of course, I don't go beyond what is covered by the syllabus, but just whatever is covered within that, just giving you a lot of policy insights, lot of intuition, right? Building up a framework for understanding these things. So you will thoroughly enjoy the subject, right? That is the only feedback I've gotten for most of my courses, and particularly for CB2, that it's a lot of fun to like go through the lectures, right? You can experience that through the demo lectures. Doubt solving, you can reach out to me for any doubts. I'll add you to a WhatsApp community where you can ask your doubts, you can make like study subgroups, so on and so forth. And past exam questions we solve in the video. Here I don't type out the answers mostly because it's not very relevant, right? Because mathematical typing is not involved, but yeah, I solve a lot of past papers. You can enroll my website through my website, or you can WhatsApp me to enroll, and you can of course reach out for any doubts or questions, right? That's all for this one. Thanks a lot.